you everyone for joining us today at the next webinar of our GMF webinar series, where every month we will feature thematic presentations focused on GMF programs. My name is Sharon Levitsky, Project Coordinator with the Green Municipal Fund's Capacity Development Team, and I'm here with my colleague Jessie Granger, Knowledge Management and Learning Officer. Si vous voulez écouter le webinaire en français, cliquez sur le bouton Interpretation au bas de votre écran et choisissez l'option Français. I would like to start today's webinar with a land acknowledgement. On behalf of FCM, I'd like to begin this session by acknowledging that I am joining you from lands that have been inhabited by Indigenous peoples for thousands of years. We at FCM recognize the Algonquin Anishinaabe people as the traditional custodians of the land upon which FCM's offices are located. I personally am currently located in Halifax, Nova Scotia, recognizing it as the traditional territory of the Mi'kmaq and Wabanaki peoples. We also recognize the contributions of Métis, Inuit, and all First Nations, both in shaping and strengthening this community and country as a whole. Wherever you are, please join me in paying our respects to the original stewards of this land and committing ourselves to thoughts and actions that will lead to meaningful reconciliation wherever we live now. The webinar today is about transitioning ice rinks to net zero under the umbrella of our community buildings retrofit funding stream. Before we dive in, a few housekeeping items to get through. Each of our presenters has prepared a 15-minute presentation to share with you today. We're going to run through each presentation one after the other and use our remaining time for discussion and Q&A at the end. You're welcome to ask questions through the chat box or the Q&A box during the presentations in the language of your choice. We will keep an eye out for any clarification questions or other key items that we should address before the Q&A session at the end. Finalement, un dernier rappel que si vous souhaitez écouter la présentation en français, vous devez sélectionner le bouton Interpretation au bas de votre écran. Vous pourrez alors choisir l'option Français. Next slide, please. The Federation of Canadian Municipalities is the national voice of local governments in Canada. FCM's mandate includes delivering programs that build municipalities' capacity to do what they do best: deliver innovative, cost-effective local solutions to environmental challenges and to enhance quality of life for their citizens. The Green Municipal Fund is our largest program and is funded by the Government of Canada. It has a double mandate to support municipal initiatives in sustainable development through funding, and share knowledge and lessons learned through online resources and tools, trainings, and peer learning and networking activities. Today, our topic of net zero ice rinks comes out of our Community Buildings Retrofit Initiative, or CBR for short. Next slide, please. Our goal today is to introduce you to paths that can help you bring your community buildings with a focus on ice rinks down to net zero. We will cover why community building retrofits are an important opportunity for cost savings and GHG reductions, as well as 2 examples of community buildings retrofits through our presentations. There will be a Q&A period at the end where we will answer any questions you might have. Next slide, please. Of all the buildings in a municipality's portfolio, why focus on community buildings? Now, these types of buildings, as many of you know, are often the facilities that have the highest operating costs and energy use throughout a municipality's building stock, especially when they aren't operating optimally. So, depending on the types of fuel used to heat your buildings or on your local sources of electricity, these buildings can be a significant source and driver of GHG emissions for municipalities across the country. Other buildings can benefit from these approaches, but from our work with municipalities, community buildings have come to light as a group of buildings that are worth focusing on for retrofits. When we're talking about a focus on community buildings, another important factor is that it's estimated that 70% of municipal facilities were constructed more than 20 years ago, and nearly a quarter are more than 50 years old. Many of these buildings are in need of repair and upgrades to continue serving the public at a high standard. This is a graph from the Canadian Infrastructure Report Card. 1 in 3 community or cultural facilities in Canada are deemed very poor, or in fair condition, meaning that they're either in need of repair, requiring upgrades in the next 5 to 10 years, or are aging and will require action in the medium to long term. Repairs are costly. You may have limited resources to do them. Determining when to make these repairs requires careful evaluation and prioritization. If your buildings will need retrofits, it's a good chance to pick a 2-in-1 option and build energy efficiency into your plan for upgrading and maintaining your facilities. Next slide, please. There are many improvements you can make to optimize the performance of these buildings to help your municipality save money right away and over the long term. They can also reduce greenhouse gas emissions while improving the delivery of community services. As part of its Retrofits Community Buildings Retrofit initiative, FCM has developed an approach to addressing these questions. It's designed so that it can be used by any community in Canada, large or small, starting from wherever you may be now in terms of your energy management approaches. The Community Buildings Retrofit initiative is designed to support your municipality along the journey of optimizing the performance of your existing community buildings, depending on where you're at. This pathway takes you from assessing where you are now to tackling low-hanging fruit cost savings. It takes you through tune-ups to planning for big long-term upgrades to implementing those upgrades. Also, I'll highlight that FCM has funding opportunities that are built to match each step in this pathway. A good starting point is knowing where you're starting from. Step 1 of GMS pathway is monitoring energy use in your building. It also helps you identify the low-hanging fruit options so you can save costs right away. That might be something as simple as making sure equipment isn't running when it's not needed. Next, we have the optimization stage. This is kind of a tune-up exercise and doesn't need to involve major renovations, focusing on existing building equipment and operations. A common name for this stage is building recommissioning. Step 3 is about long-term big picture planning. This is where you would study long-term retrofit options to bring your building to net zero emissions over 20 years or less, becoming a building that offsets greenhouse gas emissions through renewable energy produced. GMF refers to this as a GHG reduction pathway. What does this pathway approach look like in more concrete terms? Oh, last slide, please. Nope, 2 slides back. Great, thank you. So today's focus on ice rinks was inspired by a GMF-funded study that brought together 7 Ontario municipalities in a long-term planning exercise. It focused on 9 ice rinks. These were chosen because, as you can imagine, ice rinks have high energy needs. Typically, they can account for 20 to 30% of energy use for total municipal building portfolios. In this case, the objective was to get the buildings as close to possible to net zero carbon emissions by the year 2040. That's a transformational change for an ice rink. The result was the development of an action plan to reduce carbon emissions by more than 85%. Lesson learned was that long-term planning allows municipalities to consider greener solutions and ultimately generate more savings. There's a link for the final report of this study that will be posted in the chat if you're interested in more information. The initiative also helps respond to the climate emergency declarations from each municipality. As part of this initiative, based on the results and lessons learned from this feasibility study, GMF is co-developing a guide, the Climate Challenge Network, on planning on net zero ice rink retrofits. The guide will be published later this year. Catherine Wilson from the Climate Challenge Network is on the line with us today to answer any questions related to this during the Q&A period. And next slide, please. So finally, the last step is to actually implement the capital upgrades and to begin achieving those GHG reductions and cost savings. After doing all the legwork to better understand and optimize your building's performance, after identifying a process to complete upgrades that reduce emissions, also improving building operation and maintenance, as well as saving costs, the next step is then to begin the implementation. Slide, please. And now we're going to start with the presentations. So our first presentation today is from Rachel Mitchell from the Pictou County Wellness Center. Rachel Mitchell is the Climate Change and Sustainability Manager with the town of New Glasgow. In this capacity, Rachel oversees the town's sustainability initiatives, climate mitigation work, community resilience planning, and asset management. The town of New Glasgow is an owner of the Pictou County Wellness Center. Rachel contributes to the Wellness Center's climate, sustainability, and energy efficiency work. Rachel received her Bachelor of Arts in Economics from St. FX University and completed her Master's in Environmental Studies in the Environment, Resources, and Sustainability program from the University of Waterloo. And with that, take it away, Rachel.
Great, thank you very much. I'm just going to share my screen. All right, perfect. Great, yeah, so my name is Rachel Mitchell. I'm the Climate Change and Sustainability Manager with the town of New Glasgow. I'm excited to be here today speaking to you on the Pictou County Wellness Center's Energy Management and GHG Reduction Project. To give you a bit of an overview of what I will discuss today, I'm going to provide some background and local context on our center, a little bit about what it's like in this building, the challenges we're facing, especially around energy, the energy savings opportunity that we identified, and then the process in terms of moving forward with a full feasibility study, the outcomes of that study, and then the next steps, which is where we find ourselves now as we're moving forward with implementation. So to give you a bit of background, I'm the goalie in this photo. So I play at the Wellness Center, play hockey there every Thursday. The Wellness Center originally opened its doors in November 2012. It's owned by the Pictou County Wellness Center Building Authority Incorporated, and that's a municipally owned corporation. And the County of Pictou and the towns of Pictou, New Glasgow, Trenton, and Stellarton are all owners of this facility. It's located in northern Nova Scotia, so just off the Trans-Canada Highway, and it serves the immediate area of Pictou County, so all of those towns that I mentioned, and around a population of 43,000 people. In terms of users, certainly it extends beyond Pictou County to all of northern Nova Scotia, and we have visiting hockey teams and visitors from across the province as well. The facility itself is pretty big, 155,000 square feet, and it's a full recreation complex. There's 2 NHL-sized ice surfaces, a walking track around one of the rinks, lots of community spaces for meetings, activities like that. And located in the Wellness Center is also the YMCA of Pictou County. They operate a fitness center, so a full gym, a gymnasium for basketball and pickleball seems to be the very popular sport to play there. As well, there's a daycare and a full aquatic center. So there's a picture there of the pool. There's a very nice lap pool in addition to a lazy river and a hot tub. So certainly significant energy consumption takes place within this building. And as I said, it is only 10 years old, but we have had some challenges to contend with. The facility right now is not meeting intended efficiency standards or targets. It was designed to be highly energy efficient, but unfortunately, due to a number of factors, it's not functioning as intended. We're dealing with high operating costs, extremely high operating costs, malfunctioning equipment, building system control issues. So like I said, things not operating as intended. And this relates to heating optimization and sharing of heat from one area in the facility to another. So as I said, just not operating as it was initially designed. And ultimately, with all of this, we have unsustainable energy usage. So usage that we cannot afford long term, and certainly this facility is something that we want to be operating in our community for the foreseeable future. So those are some of the challenges that we're contending with, and this leads to reliability concerns. So there have been cases where the pool or the rinks have had to close, and that obviously is not favorable for our community and certainly for the users of this facility. The energy savings opportunity that we saw with this building came from the town of New Glasgow issuing a request for proposals for an energy savings performance contract. This RFP was issued in October of 2020, and it was open for a month or so. And given that the town of New Glasgow is one of the owners of the Wellness Center, they were able to join in on this and be part of that opportunity. We completed an initial walkthrough in February of 2021. So a simple kind of opportunity assessment. We had an engineer come through and say, yep, there's lots of savings opportunities here. Here are some of the key areas. And with that preliminary report, the board reviewed this information and made the decision in March of 2021 to proceed with a project development agreement to then complete a full investment grade audit feasibility study of what's possible in this building. So the objectives of this feasibility study and this investment grade audit were to look at how we could reduce operational costs, upgrade critical infrastructure and capital equipment, and how we could use energy and operational savings to actually pay for this initial investment in a reasonable payback period. So how can we take off 30% off of our energy savings and use that to pay off the initial investment? And our goal at the time was to do this in about 10 years. And I'll get to the results later. Another main objective, and this is one that really speaks to me as a climate professional, is reducing our greenhouse gas emissions. And this is through energy reductions and energy efficiency strategies. So really optimizing the functionality of this building. And lastly, improving operational performance. The investment grade audit was completed by Johnson Controls. They were selected as the preferred proponent for the energy savings work. So in terms of where we are in our timeline now, the board signed on to the project development agreement in March, and then in June 2021 of the same year, so a couple months later, we started with the site visits. So we reviewed this building, and we being myself, I was part of a few of the walkthroughs, in addition to the engineering team, really top to bottom. So looking at all the possible improvement measures that could be part of a feasible project. So there was an assessment of lighting, mechanical systems, building systems, and renewable energy as well. And I think it would have been in about April of 2021 that FCM announced the Community Buildings Retrofit program, and the GHG reduction pathway really spoke to us. We saw it as an opportunity to align this work we were already doing and expand the scope so that we could really understand opportunities for net zero going forward. I should say the facility is already fully electric, likely because it's only 10 years old. This was a bit of forward thinking. And Nova Scotia is unfortunately a rather high carbon grid. But with that, there's still lots of opportunity, and we can set ourselves up to be kind of a future-proof facility and be able to take advantage of long-term GHG reduction opportunities. So we were able to apply to that fund and were successful. So the scope of the study was expanded to really understand GHG reduction pathways and those opportunities going forward. So like I said, a lot of experts came through that building and really looked at everything. And there was a fair bit of background work as well to establish a baseline. What are we at in terms of energy usage as it stands? And then where do we want to go? In terms of the improvements, there are 5 key areas, starting with controls optimization. So this kind of fits into some of those categories around the Community Buildings Retrofit program that Sharon mentioned. But certainly optimizing how systems are operating. With having 2 ice rinks and massive swimming aquatic center and gymnasiums, there's obviously a lot happening. So we want to be able to ensure that we're optimizing the functionality and all of the systems that are happening and how they're all interconnected. Heat recovery is another key area. So sharing of the heat from the ice plant over to the swimming pool and different areas within the facility. LED lighting. We hear that one a lot. It's often referred to as the low-hanging fruit. I mean, you can see this picture of the gym here. Lights are on all the time. So being able to switch out all lights in the building, and I will note, I think some are already LED, but switching them all over, and certainly in the optimization categories that would tie into lighting and controls around occupancy sensors and such. Solar wall is another really exciting one that would be on, I think, the one side of the building. And lastly, atrium, dressing room, cooling, and dehumidification and equipment upgrades. Less on the energy savings, I'm pretty sure, for this one, but certainly part of improving the functionality of our facility. As a summary, so with all of the information that was assessed with the visits and in terms of developing a project, this is where we landed. So a total project cost of around 2.8 million with annual energy savings of approximately $370,000, so utility cost savings. The incentives are on the lower end here. This is an estimate, a very conservative estimate. So this would include Efficiency Nova Scotia dollars, some of our FCM study dollars here, and the Wellness Center is submitting for capital funding and did receive funding from the province as well for Rink revitalization, and those dollars are not included in there. But I like to keep it on the lower end in this case, just to show the simple payback without even having a whole lot of incentive dollars. So we're looking at around a 7-year payback, which is awesome and absolutely speaks to the interests of our board. As I said before, contending with very high operating costs, if we're able to have this initial investment and have it pay off quite quickly, that's very attractive to our board and to the community as well. This facility certainly will be a mainstay for decades to come. That's our goal. So if we're able to complete this work, then all the better. The energy savings and GHG reductions are also awesome. And this is for our base level project. So I foresee in years to come, as we kind of align this work with other aspects around asset renewal and asset management, we can incorporate more renewable energy and certainly see greater reductions. And ideally, Nova Scotia will get off coal faster than they intend to. So certainly that would lead to more savings as well. In terms of the process, so the site visits were in June of 2021. The final report was delivered in November of that same year. And with the report, it was the full feasibility study, a measurement and verification plan, greenhouse gas emission reduction pathways. So 3 reports all in one, I suppose. And this was presented to the operations committee, and that is a committee of the board. From there, it was presented to the board for approval and with their recommendations of that committee. And a financing plan was developed in terms of how we can afford this and how we'll move it through. And it was around probably January or February of this year that the energy savings performance contract was signed. And I'm pleased to say that the Wellness Center is in the implementation phase now. So really trying to get shovels in the ground, so to speak, and make this work happen in the near term. Social benefits is an important area, and I think it's difficult to quantify when it comes to a study. I think it's hard to say that there was a lot of social benefits that resulted from simply the study phase, but truly I think at the core of this work and the work we're trying to do around the implementation, we need to improve the functionality and the sustainability of this facility so we are better serving the needs of our community. We want to establish ourselves as leaders in the space of sustainability and climate action and have a commitment to net zero. And more so, I have just a standard picture here of the locker room area, because I think for the Wellness Center, we need to go beyond the traditional user, so to speak, being a hockey player like myself, and look at how we can incorporate more components of wellness and expand really our definition of wellness when it comes to using this center. We need to better serve equity and reconciliation seeking groups. And we can't necessarily achieve that through an energy efficiency project, but it absolutely needs to be incorporated in this work and is something we're looking to do. And furthermore, in terms of benefits, really having a more reliable facility and facility that users can access at all times and feel comfortable in accessing. In terms of key takeaways that I would say get started. I mean, we're looking at a facility here that's only about 10 years old, but as Sharon said, there are rinks and communities across this country that are extremely old and contending with high operating costs and lots of issues around reliability and equipment breaking down and such. Our energy costs are increasing right before our eyes right now. And for those of us in Nova Scotia, Nova Scotia Power is applying to increase rates by 10% over the next 3 years. So we know what's coming. Inflation certainly is in a lot of discussions these days. So get started, find out what's possible, and build a network. FCM has many resources and connections in terms of how you can get started. And I think just approaching that conversation. Next would be alignment. So for me, I'm always moving forward with how can we reduce our emissions, but often you have to speak different languages. So how can we align this with our strategic objectives, our asset management plans? And really, I think finding support is important and looking in maybe less obvious places. So I would say, I was a champion for this project and certainly a champion for climate work across our community, but find those other champions and perhaps they're really focused on saving money or improving the user experience or whatever it may be. But I'm going to try to assemble a project team that covers lots of different perspectives, disciplines, that kind of thing. So you can really generate buy-in across your organization and ultimately across your community. And lastly, with that, it would be engaging folks. So engaging your building operators, engaging with building users, and further kind of revisiting alignment, finding out how we can move forward with other high-level objectives through this project. So simultaneously reducing energy, but also improving the ice in your rink or the pool or whatever it may be. Those would be some of my key takeaways. So yeah, I just want to say thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity to share this exciting project. We're right at the start here, but I think there's great opportunity ahead of us. And in the years to come, I certainly think that we'll be reducing our energy usage and our greenhouse gas emissions. And it'll be great to kind of cut the ribbon on this project in the next year or so and share all the exciting upgrades that have taken place. And for me personally, improve my ice times every Thursday. So thank you very much. I appreciate it, and I'll pass it back.
Great. Thank you so much, Rachel, for sharing the journey of the Pictou County Wellness Center. And we're really looking forward to seeing how the upgrades go as time goes forward. And with that, I'll be introducing Michael Dean from the town of Halton Hills. So Michael leads the town of Halton Hills low carbon transition strategy. He is involved in developing and implementing a wide range of climate change and energy plans, policies, and strategies, including the town's corporate energy management program. Michael serves as the town's energy champion or subject matter expert, providing advice to council, town departments, the public, and external agencies. Michael has been working in climate change mitigation at a municipal level for almost a decade and is committed to taking meaningful action at the local level to address the climate emergency. And with that, take it away, Michael. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, let me just get my screen up here and I will start the presentation. Okay, everybody can see that, I hope now. Okay, so today I'm going to talk about our low carbon arenas project, which provides a roadmap to net zero over time for two of our biggest and most complex facilities, our two ice rinks. So starting off, just a bit of the kind of motivation for this project and other work we do at the town. This is our climate emergency declaration from May 2019, which committed the town to achieving net zero carbon by 2030. So a big challenge and something we need obviously to get working on right away. The low carbon design briefs and the projects I'm talking about today are part of our corporate energy management program, which is a component of the low carbon resilience framework, the town's overall strategy to achieving our climate change objectives. For our corporate operations, which is a subset of this, you can see that 50% of our emissions just about are the result of energy use at our facilities. Most of that is natural gas consumption. So switching our energy loads away from natural gas in our facilities is a key objective of our program overall. So our bigger facilities need plans to achieve net zero over the next 10 years or so if we're going to get to zero by 2030. So how do we do that? In our 2022 corporate energy plan, we said, let's not focus so much on individual measures, what we can do at our facilities. Instead, let's look at how we make decisions and prioritize projects. One of the ideas that came out of this approach in our work with EnerLife to develop this plan was the idea of what we were calling a low carbon design brief. The low carbon design brief was developed as a way of addressing a key gap in our organization's approach to energy management. So as an organization, we're good at setting these big organization level planning processes, our corporate energy demand management plan, and we're really good at the sort of system level planning, like we need to replace some piece of equipment in our facilities. How do we do that? But we weren't so good necessarily at linking those overall objectives with those individual projects. So the low carbon design brief helps us address that gap by translating the overall objectives and goals of our program into an actionable set of strategies and investments at the facility level that can then be developed as individual system level interventions and integrated with our capital planning processes and our asset management plans for all of our facilities. So an example of this, we're looking at the town's 2 arenas today. So, we're a fairly small organization. These are the buildings that we manage as part of our corporate energy management plan. You can see the 2 facilities that I'm talking about today, Mold Masters Sportsplex and Acton Arena and Community Center. Mold Masters Sportsplex is a 4-pad arena, and Acton Arena is a 2-pad arena. Both are facilities that have older arenas that have been expanded more recently. So these are complex facilities. They use a lot of energy. Their Mold Masters Sportsplex is our highest energy consumer. Of our top 5 facilities, which include Mold Masters, Acton Arena, our community center, our public works operations center, and our town hall, those account for over 90% of the town's emissions. Interestingly enough, Georgetown Library and Cultural Center, which is number 6 on this list of energy consuming facilities, is actually near the bottom of our GHG intensity for a facility because it runs on a geothermal heating system. So we already have experience at the town with this type of low carbon development and low carbon construction. So in around 2020, we completed the ice rink feasibility studies, working with the Climate Challenge Network, that cohort study that was discussed earlier. The goal of that project, from our perspective, was to identify key decision points where investments needed to be made in our facilities over the next 10 years, identify actions and a program of actions leading to net zero by 2030 that would align with those points of intervention and those key decision points, and then integrate that program to achieve net zero by 2030 into our asset management and capital investment plans for those facilities so that we could achieve net zero over time. So this is this comes from the Climate Challenge Network study. It gives you a kind of overall outline of the process, roughly, and this should be familiar to folks who've worked on energy efficiency work in facilities at various times. Initially you want to emphasize energy efficiency, getting your building running as efficiently as it possibly can. Then in the case of these arenas especially, we wanted to integrate heat recovery to capture as much waste heat, especially from the refrigeration processes, as possible, and use it in the facility to offset our natural gas loads. And then integrate renewables to remove emissions associated with grid supplied electricity primarily. And then, anything that's left, we can look at potentially purchasing credits, although we don't have a plan to do that currently. In these 2 facilities, we've actually done a lot of that energy efficiency work in the past. So it does present a bit of a challenge as we go ahead with implementing this stuff. These are fairly efficient facilities. So, people talk about that low hanging fruit that you want to address first. I think a lot of that low hanging fruit has already been addressed at these facilities. So we're really looking at taking this next step. Primarily, that has meant integrating heat recovery and electrifying natural gas loads in both of these facilities. So again, this was the proposed pathway that came out of that study with the Climate Challenge Network. The emphasis here is really maximizing heat recovery opportunities, using waste heat from the refrigeration process for the rinks, integrate when at the point of replacement of HVAC facility, integrate that heat recovery and electrify the natural gas loads wherever possible, improve the efficiency of our systems by implementing a building automation system, replacing the boilers with electric boiler systems, again, supported by heat recovery, and then replacing our ice resurfacers with electric units and installing cold water flooding systems, provided those can be done without impacting the service levels of the facility and the ice quality, which is of course a paramount concern, because we do need to achieve these carbon goals, these emission reduction goals, but we don't want to impact the user's enjoyment of the facility while we do that. So if we do all those things, this is what it would look like for the emissions in those facilities. This would result in eliminating nearly all of the natural gas consumption at the facilities. The only emissions associated with these facilities at that point would be emissions associated with grid supplied electricity. Implementing the full program for these facilities, we estimate will reduce our total GHG emissions from all facilities by about 42%. So a significant savings for across our entire portfolio. So these projects are underway currently at the town. We're in the implementation phase. One of the real benefits of doing this type of work that we've been doing with this feasibility study is that it gives us an opportunity where, in this case, we were faced with the need to replace our dehumidifiers in both of the facilities. And typically what might happen is that need to replace those pieces of equipment would come up, and we might say, we need to decarbonize this facility. But if we don't have a plan for how we're going to do that, we won't be able to come up with a plan before that equipment needs to be replaced, and you end up more or less replacing it with a like for like type of system, and locking yourself into further fossil fuel consumption. So by having this plan in place beforehand, we were able to know, okay, now that we have to replace these dehumidification units, we know exactly how that's going to integrate with the plan for the facility, and we can go ahead and do that knowing that it'll align with our objectives overall. So we're moving forward with this year. We're doing the design and engineering for integrating the heat recovery system, replacing our dehumidification with electric units, integrating the heat recovery with that. Interestingly, with this project, we've been able to install local controllers in those units so that we can integrate with a future building automation system. Again, that ability to look ahead and know how this facility is going to change over time means that we know that we are likely to make those investments, and when that does happen, we'll integrate these investments that we're making now. And by doing this, we're able to establish the heat recovery system as a basis for future phases of HVAC replacement. So as we replace other equipment, we can bring the heat recovery into that. It replaces critical dehumidifier infrastructure that needed to be replaced anyways, and begins this process of transitioning the facility away from fossil fuel consumption. These are the impacts of these projects, this first phase of projects that we're hoping to complete in early 2023. It will achieve just over 200 tons of greenhouse gas emissions reductions, which would account for about an 11% reduction in emissions across all of our facilities. And as we integrate, as I said, that building automation and additional HVAC loads onto the heat recovery, this will prepare us to reduce almost all natural gas use by these arenas. So this has been this hasn't been a simple process. Obviously, these are quite complex facilities and quite complex processes. As we translate the feasibility studies that we completed into actual implementation, we learn and we have to adjust and make changes. Some of the challenges that we face over time as we've gone through this implementation phase, equipment, cost escalation, everything is becoming more expensive. And also as we learn more details about the systems that we're working with, the costs have increased. Dealing with supply chain delays and getting equipment delivered to us in time to be able to be installed has been a challenge. We've identified some insufficient electrical infrastructure at these facilities. So, we need to be aware that as we're electrifying some of these loads, it's going to require us to upgrade some of the infrastructure servicing the facility. Another challenge has been sort of complex spacing needs for the facility. In both cases, these are facilities with older arenas that have been expanded. So trying to integrate all these systems when they're in various parts of the building and these mechanical rooms weren't necessarily designed for the type of equipment that we're putting in. So we have to actually deal with the physical reality of where equipment is located in the facility and the space that's available to us. So that can become complex as you get into implementation. And then finally, part of the challenge has been is that we understand is coming is balancing the timing of these loads, especially with our heat recovery system. So making sure that the waste heat that we're creating is available when it's needed to supply the loads that we need it to supply. So that can be a bit of a challenge. Theoretically, we have enough waste heat to meet this demand, but getting it there when it needs to be it will require some work on our part. So, what are the key takeaways from this process? I think, you want to understand your portfolio. So what are the highest priority facilities? These might be the ones with the highest energy consumption or the highest greenhouse gas emissions impacts. They also might be facilities with major upcoming capital investments that are approaching, where you understand there will be an opportunity to make these kind of key transition points. So you want to identify those and hopefully approach those facilities. Determining what your goals are for the organization and for the facilities in particular. What are your carbon targets? What are the timeframes you're working with? What types of project economics are going to work for your organization? That's very important. Starting with one building, or in this case, we were working with a small portfolio of similar buildings is very helpful. When we started this, the first one of these that we did was our town hall. There was a bit of hesitancy around what this would actually look like, how it would help us do this type of planning, because we'd really never done anything like this before. The success of those studies has really helped us make the case that this is an important approach that we can extend to other facilities, and has got that kind of buy-in from the rest of the organization. Obviously, all of this is ideally leading to integrating the results of these feasibility studies with your asset management and your capital investment plans for these facilities. So the kind of objective here is that we'll hopefully do all of these studies for all of our facilities, and then we will be able to integrate that with our planned capital investments in the facility, so that every year we can look and say, or every couple of years we can look and say, okay, these are the projects that we need to do for all of our facilities in order to meaningfully advance them towards low carbon. So you don't have to be, checking, figuring out, what are we going to do this time around as we replace these pieces of equipment? We already know. And importantly, be prepared to adapt as you move forward with your projects. I talked about the price increases, some of the challenges around having to adjust our approach as we discover as we learn more about these systems and how we can implement them. So, obviously this type of analysis is a roadmap. It's a vision for how the facility will evolve over time. But once you kind of come into contact with the reality of what you're trying to do, you have to be adaptable while keeping that kind of overall vision in mind. So thanks, everyone. That's my presentation for today.
Okay, thank you so much, Michael, for presenting about all of the great work going on in the town of Halton Hills regarding these great retrofits. And hopefully this inspires a lot of other communities to begin their own projects as well. And so now we have a short Q&A period where Michael and Rachel are both available to answer any questions you have regarding community buildings retrofits and their projects, as well as reiterating that Catherine Wilson from the Climate Challenge Network is also on the line if you have any questions regarding the Net Zero Ice Rinks project. And so I saw that we got a couple of questions in the chat as you were speaking. So I will start with those and then we'll go to the couple of questions in the Q&A box. So first was a question, how much heat in terms of percentage were you able to recover on the CBR arena? I'm guessing this is directed to Michael because this was while you were speaking.
I don't know the exact percentage of heat recovery that we'll be able to achieve. The intent is to offset just about all of our natural gas consumption, so that would be pretty much all of the heating load. As I said, we're still, that's what we've modeled out through that feasibility analysis. We'll have to kind of, as we go and integrate some of these additional loads, we'll hopefully learn more about exactly how much we're going to be able to achieve in practice. But the analysis shows that we should be able to reduce almost all of our natural gas consumption.
Thank you. And another question for Mike that came after this. Did you use an ESCO for this project? No,
we're implementing the project entirely through the town and through our facilities team, who are great partners in implementing all of these projects with us. So not using an ESCO currently. We've looked at that model a little bit, but trying to actually figure out how it'll actually work for us. We haven't quite got there yet.
Okay, and then there was another one in the chat before I'll move on to the Q&A box. Were building envelope upgrades looked at on either project to improve energy efficiency?
I can start on this one. I actually just combed through our feasibility report, just control find for building envelope, and because I could not recall. And as far as I can tell, no, we did not include that, at least not in full detail in terms of facility improvement measure to move forward with. That could be based on just the age of our building. That was maybe considered in construction, but our answer would be no there.
Yeah, same here. Our approach is primarily around the HVAC equipment and the kind of mechanical side of things, rather than interventions in the envelope. Again, we have a big part of the arenas are fairly recently built, so the envelope is good on those ones, and there are complexities around how we can actually make envelope upgrades and some of the older stuff. But yeah, it's not a major part of our plans.
Great. And next question, did your municipality need to build public support for these projects in order to implement them?
I guess I'll take it. We haven't done public consultation for the most part around these projects. They ideally don't impact the user experience of the arena really at all. It should be almost completely, if not completely, behind, back in the mechanical rooms, and they won't notice, right? One of the key objectives and something that we're very careful to keep in mind is that, we're not impacting the quality of the ice. We're not impacting the service that's delivered at the arena. That's a primary concern. We know we can't do that in order to achieve our objectives. So ideally, it's sort of it's neutral from the perspective of the experience of the arena, or potentially improves it, right, as we fix some of these dehumidification issues with the facilities. Obviously, there's quite a bit of support, I think, in the community for our overall climate change objectives, and we want to, as we build these things out, help to kind of tell the story at our facilities of what we're doing, so that people are aware of this, because as I said, a lot of it kind of happens behind the scenes and is hard to notice that it's happening. So we want to be able to tell that story. So public engagement that we would do would be more around, making people aware of this as we build it out, but not so much in the kind of development.
Yeah, similar on our end. We did share information when we signed on for the project development phase to complete the study. There was a press release, and it was on the radio, and that kind of just simple engagement, I would say. I don't think there has been a lot in terms of meaningful engagement with the community. I anticipate there being more as we move through the implementation phase, because I think, as Michael said, it's important to tell that story. And I think, given that our facility is not that old, there have been questions from the community around, why are things not working properly? So it is an important story to tell, to really highlight what we are doing to fix the problem and how it does align with our climate objectives. And I mean, what's interesting is the Wellness Center is owned by so many different municipalities, and I'm the only climate staff person in our area. So I think it's great because the Wellness Center captures so many different people and perspectives, and obviously communities, that we are able to advance climate objectives. Smaller towns don't necessarily have a dedicated staff person. So I think that's part of the story we're trying to tell as well.
Okay, and just to keep going down the list, and just an FYI, we're not going to get through all of the questions, unfortunately. There's lots of great questions on this list. We'll do another question, and any of the questions that we have remaining, we will take note of them and see if we can follow up on these questions. So otherwise, the last question we're going to take, so were there any technical tidbits in the reports on how the rinks were to be made net zero? For example, adjusting to loads, dealing with natural gas system changes, etc.
I'm not sure I understand exactly what the question is getting at. I mean, the objective of the feasibility study was really to do that technical analysis of how exactly those systems would transition off of natural gas and towards a kind of decarbonization. We built, the consultant and Climate Challenge Network that completed the study for us did energy modeling for the facilities and did that feasibility analysis of what systems and what technical changes would be, the best pathway towards net zero for the facility. So, yeah, I mean, obviously, it's at a certain level of analysis, and we have to go, there's additional levels as we dive into the more kind of technical stage as we get into the design and engineering, but that was the objective, was to figure out how it could be done.
Yeah, similar for us. I think we'll reach a point where certainly rooftop solar will come into play, where we'll want to begin offsetting usage with on-site renewable energy generation. And like I said, our facility has 2 rinks and a gym and a pool, and there's lots happening. And we are already fully electrified, so natural gas was never put in place when the facility was built. So in a sense, we have an advantage there. And as the grid greens, which is supposed to happen and supposed to pick up the pace on that, I think we are well positioned to achieve net zero. And certainly rooftop solar will be a part of that puzzle is what I anticipate. And it was identified in our GHG reduction pathway.
Okay, so thank you very much for your answers to the questions. And there are a bunch of questions remaining in the Q&A. So if in the next couple of minutes you see any that you want to type out an answer for anybody, you're more than welcome to. Otherwise, we are going to move on to the next slide here as we wrap up before we go. So here's a quick overview of the funding available. And as you can see, we support you every step of the way, from getting the data you need to make decisions to implementing your retrofit. You can call Émilie Marlot, our programs outreach advisor, for more information, and we will share contact information momentarily. And you can also find this information on our website. We will also be following up with an email that will direct you to additional resources. Next slide, please. Our next webinar will be on the subject of land use, which will take place on July 28th at 1 p.m. So if you're interested in registering for our next webinar, the link will be in the chat, and we hope to see you at the next one as well. And finally, if you could put up the last slide. Thank you for attending this webinar today. Thank you to Mike and Rachel for sharing the retrofit journeys of the town of Halton Hills and the Pictou County Wellness Center. And before you go, please fill out this quick poll so we can know where to improve for our future webinars. We really appreciate you taking the time to fill this out if you can, so that we can know how we can best continue helping you and your municipalities. So thank you again.